This is forging and using a steel striker. This is the sort of steel striker you'd use for fire lighting with flint and steel. Usually I'd use an old file to make a striker, but in this case I'm using store-bought W1 tool steel in a 1/2-inch round bar. Here I'm forging it down to approximately the shape of a file. I'm aiming for about 1/8 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch by somewhere in around 3 inches. I just take a bit of a guess at that, and trial and error gets you pretty close. I decided that it wasn't quite enough flattened material, so I'm flattening a little bit more of the round bar down to 1/8 of an inch by hammering half on the anvil and half off the anvil. I'm drawing out the taper on one side of the steel for now over the horn of the anvil and flattening it on the face of the anvil. I use the horn because it draws out the steel a little bit faster. I've edited out quite a few heats just for the sake of the video, but I go back to the fire for more heat quite often because I'm nervous about cracking the steel as it turns to black again. I've switched to a rounding hammer here, and I'm refining the taper on the first side of the steel striker. Here I am using the rounding hammer to refine the point in the center of the striker and try and create a nice gentle curve down the back of the striker. Just refining it now, straightening it out, and preparing to turn the little finial on the end of the first taper. I curl the first taper over on the edge of the anvil. I've thought about which direction I want it to curve beforehand. It's pretty easy to curl it the wrong way. And again, lots of short little heats to keep that tip nice and warm and not burn it. Now that I've got the smaller scroll on the end, I start forming the larger scroll over the horn of the anvil and flatten it out on the face of the anvil. Lots of heats. If it was going to crack, this is a good place for it to crack. When I've formed more or less a hook on the end, I'll sandwich the hook between the anvil and the hammer to tighten the hook up so that it doubles back on itself. I wasn't that happy with how this scroll worked out, so I just straightened it out a bit on the horn of the anvil and then flatten out the striking section of the striker again as well on the horn. I get it flattened out and refined by upsetting on the end of the striker like that, I force the smaller scroll towards the middle and refine the curve of the scroll. And check to see if I like the shape. When I'm happy with the shape of the first side, I cut it off the original bar with a cut-off hardy. So here I hammer the piece onto the chisel and cut it most of the way off, and twist off the last bit so that I don't score the hammer with the chisel. I'm just working on the fire a bit here, moving some more coke into the firebox and piling up some more coal around the outside, and start heating the second side of the striker. And then we repeat as side one on side two, drawing out the taper over the horn and flattening it on the face of the anvil. Again, I've edited out a few heats there as I continue to taper it. I'm using the rounding hammer again to create a nice gentle curve down the point of the second side. I'm trying to estimate how much material I'll need to come out symmetrical with the first side. Just trying to point the thickest part in the middle of the striker to get a nice crisp point between the two halves, and any final refining of the second taper. And I bend the small scroll again in the same direction as the first one, with lots of short heats so that I don't burn the tip and I keep it nice and soft. Just wrap it around in as tight a little curl as I can manage. And then bend the larger scroll around the horn of the anvil. The second scroll is usually a little bit harder because you're looking to match the first one rather than just get a nice pleasing bend. You've got to get a nice pleasing bend that's the same as the previous one. Upset again on the end to force the smaller scroll towards the center of the striker again. And then I check it out to see that I like the way the two curves work together and make sure it's flat and into the fire for normalizing. So normalizing, I heat the steel to about red hot, and this relieves some tension from the forging, and then I'll let it cool right next to the fire nice and slowly. It's the same process once that's cooled down to heat it to red for the hardening. So I've heated it to a red heat, maybe a little beyond red, and then quench in the water to harden it. The W1 tool steel is a water hardening steel. And so now we have a glass hard final forging. And the hardness makes it brittle. So the next step will be to temper it and soften it strategically. So I sand with emery cloth on the sides to remove some of the oxidization so that I can see some of the shiny metal underneath. Get some of that shiny metal exposed, and that will allow me to see the way the heat moves through the steel in the tempering process. So for tempering, I've heated up a good sized block of steel to act as a heat source. And my main goal here is to make sure that those thin scrolls on the ends are nicely softened and therefore not brittle. I'm also looking to take the thin parts to blue is perfectly fine, nice and softened, and the striking surface to at least light straw color, but even brown or bronze would be fine. I'm watching pretty intently to try and see the way the color runs in the steel. So you can see the finials have turned a nice dark blue and are therefore nice and soft again. And I push the hole striker onto the heat source, trying to get a little more heat in that lighter section in the middle. And about there you can see it turning a sort of straw color. And I try and grab it off and fumble it. So I would have liked to have got it in the quench a little sooner, but it'll still throw great sparks. So you can see the sort of bronzy color in the middle and the blues and grays out beyond that. So that's now been tempered and is a usable striker for flint and steel. There it is, ready to go. We'll see just how it throws a spark. So for this process, I'm going to use char cloth, which is, in my case, cotton canvas that I've turned basically to charcoal. And it will take a relatively cool spark from the flint and steel and smolder away and allow us to blow it into flame. And also there you can see the piece of flint. In that bag I keep the head of a bulrush because I really like the way the bulrush down takes a flame from the char cloth, so I usually keep one for that purpose. And there's my tinder bundle, which is mostly dried grass, and I add the bulrush down to the middle of the bundle and use the flint and steel. So I take the char cloth and set it on the top of the flint right by the edge that I'm going to strike off of, and hold it there with my thumb and and strike the stone with the steel until a spark lands right on the char cloth and starts smoldering. Even in the daylight there, you can see some of those sparks. So I've got a little ember glowing in the char cloth. We'll add that to the tinder bundle. And blow it into flame. And I try and move the tinder bundle quite a bit while I'm catching a breath, so that the movement through the air feeds the fire and it gives me a little bit more fresh air to inhale for the next breath. And just blow it into flames. And there it goes. And I've got some kindling set aside, ready to go. And that's how you start a fire with a hand-forged fire steel. Here it is again. Flint and steel. Thank you very much for watching.